Okay, so I have this portrait that was taken in a casual setting. We live in a world where you're going to have staged pictures like this. This was at the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina. Not everything is going to be in a studio. In fact, there's definitely a push to move beyond the perfect settings of a studio. So I'm going to show you a couple things I might start with editing in this particular video. The basics are always going to be the same. How I start cropping, I don't need that. I don't need everything in the background. Remember, if I know that I want this to be a particular size, I can choose different things. So if I know I want this to be 4 inches wide by 6 inches, say I enter it wrong, I just flip it. It's a 4 by 6. Now every time I go to crop that image, it's going to keep those proportions. So that's just something to be aware of as you progress if you want things to be the same. I'm going to keep this particular image. I'm going to have her running pretty much through that center, thinking about that rule of thirds. Move it over just a hair. Move that up just a touch. So then I hit return or that check mark to keep my adjustments. The next thing I'm going to look at, again, I can adjust my brightness and contrast. So this should all be stuff that you've been doing on every picture. I'm going to increase the brightness just a titch. Let's increase the contrast just a hair. I don't want to go overboard. So now I can hit that double caret, come back to my layers. And for this, I really like to bump up the saturation of an image. So again, I'm going to just increase that saturation just a hair. Again, I don't want to go overboard for this image. It's a person, but I do like the richness that color brings. So the next new tool we're going to look at, and again, these are steps I do on every picture. The next new tool we look at is dodging and burning. And dodging is when you lighten areas in an image. It looks kind of like this lollipop over here on the left. If I hold it down, I can see the burn tool, which is this hand, and it darkens areas. And back in the day when I took photography, we did not have digital classes. Well, we had some digital classes, but not many. We had to do this in a dark room. So people would actually do this manually to a photograph. Well, we're again in a digital world, and for this, we're going to be doing that digitally. So I can do things, I can zoom in. I always like, I literally zoom in to an image every time. If you forget over here, this magnifying glass, I can press in and I can get really close or far out from an image. Okay, so I've selected the dodge tool, so we're going to lighten some areas. This toolbar up at the top makes a difference. So again, if you need to pause this as you're working through this video, please do take it step by step. When I select range, depending on what I select, shadows, midtones, or highlights, that is what it is lightening. So if I want my highlights to get lighter, I select highlights. If I want my midtones to get lighter, I select midtones. If I want my shadows to get lighter, I select shadows. I'm going to try and pull out the shadows just a hair. I then go to adjust my exposure. So if I adjust it to 100%, and you can see if I click down here, this adjusts the brush size. Right now I'll leave it at 89 pixels. I actually softened this even more so. Your default is this soft round brush. Try these out. The thing you're going to want to watch out for, and I'll show you this as well, is I don't want to leave obvious brush marks on my person. So say I have, and I got to make sure I'm on the right layer. I go to my background layer, and I select this hard brush. You can see, because of where I've made this mark, I have this really obnoxious looking brush mark on her face. I like to go with a softer. So it's like this soft round pressure one usually works pretty well. And we're going to go with the shadows. Because my exposure is up, even with a softer brush, it just brightens it up way too much. So I'm going to knock this number down. I usually start pretty light. Let's start with 23%. And I'm going to start to go in, and I'm going to get a little bit closer. And I'm just going to take that brush and I'm going to very lightly, so you can see it, it's subtle, right? If I want this to be more obvious, I can go over the layer again. So like let's get some of that in here right away. If I want this to be more obvious, so then I zoom out, and you can see where right there that brush mark is too much for me. I can undo it. Right now I haven't saved anything. The other thing you can start to do is you can actually, so let's go back in time. I can duplicate this background layer. If I hit my little hamburger menu and I hit duplicate layer, hit OK, I can actually work on the background copy instead of the background itself. So it's a good habit to get into. So I've copied the layer. I'm still going in and I'm brightening this up. And you can see, again, subtle is good. I personally don't like people who look super photoshopped and fake. We don't live in a fake world. But you can start to see that pulling some of this out, it'll make her eyes look a little bit brighter. Another thing people will use this for is teeth. Again, I am pretty subtle with this. Instead of having it at shadows, I'm going to change it to highlights. I have my brush down and I'm just pulling this off. These are, let's say, and I'm just double clicking on this. And this one is a tooth that's kind of in shadow. So instead of highlights, I'm going to try for midtones and see if that helps. And it did a little bit. Let's see what shadows does. So it's brighter. Again, I can always increase the exposure if I want to. Let's go back to highlights and brighten up the lips just a little bit. Just a little bit up here. Let's try some of the midtones. And anyways, so you can see how this can get really intense as you continue on. You can see her lips are brighter. Her teeth are just a little bit brighter. Again, I would go back and I would I'd knock that down a little bit, but yeah, that's more realistic. That was just one hair too much. Another tool, so again, that was my dodging tool. My burning tool will actually darken things. So on this particular image, there's not a ton that I would darken. Again, though, it works the same way where I have shadows, midtones, and highlights. Depending on what I want to darken or lighten, I'm going to change things. So say I really want to darken some of these shadows in her hair. Or no, you know what? Let's say I want to darken some of these highlights. I'm coming in like with her lips right here. There's a lot of like really obvious glare kind of going on. I've come in. Again, my exposure is at 5%. These are subtle. So these aren't hard and fast numbers. These are numbers to get you started. And then again, these sliders, you just kind of have to experiment. I always say start slow. Remember, if I go to edit, undo, or edit, step backward, I can get rid of that that step. So don't be afraid to try things out. And again, maybe you'll see if I darken things too much, it starts to get gray. So if it becomes gray, ooh, don't want that. I'm gonna just eliminate that step. I've deleted that. So dodging and burning, lots of fun, lots of opportunity. I would actually come in and try and lighten up some more of the shadow on her face. The other thing that is a useful tool is if I have things like blemishes, you know, or some people are sensitive about birthmarks. I can go under, sorry, I moved it around, my spot healing tool brush. And we used this in a previous demo. Again, if I want to adjust the size of my brush, I do it by selecting size and moving that around. I'm going to click on sample all layers. Everything else we should be fine. And I can come in and drag this down. And it does a pretty good job of eliminating some of those. I'm actually going to increase the brush size. And Photoshop is sampling the pixels around the area that you're fixing. So if your skin isn't perfect, you know, it's going to be really hard and difficult to make things look exactly perfect. Again, I say why. Life's too short, but that's everyone's personal opinion. Say I want to get rid of that mole right there, boom, takes it away. So now, you know, again, I can decide, do I want that there or do I not? So again, dodging and burning tool and that spot healing brush are some just kind of straightforward tools I can use to save this picture, or sorry, to edit this picture. Remember, if I want to save this file now, I can. So I can go under File, Save, and I'm just going to leave it under Portraits. If I save it as a Photoshop file, so I will say, that means that I am able, and I hit save and I hit OK, I am able to open this back up and continue editing on these layers. Once I'm completely done with my edits, I'm going to go ahead and flatten my layers, flatten image. I clicked that hamburger bar and then I clicked flatten image. And then now is when I'm going to go under File, Save As. I'll keep it as Jillian Progress, but instead of it being a Photoshop file, I'm going to save it as a JPEG and hit save. And remember, right now it's an 8.6 megabyte file. That's huge. I'm going to decrease the file size. So again, I'm trying to keep it between 1 and 2 megabytes. I'll keep it at 1.5 here. Hit OK. Now I have a file I can open up on a different platform.